Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock and I'm going to call the 16th meeting of the Planning Environment Committee to order. Please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Wauk, and Adirondack. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pec@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 245. At this time, we'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, let's move on to the consent items. I'll look for a motion on that from committee. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I'll move all the items.
Looks like a seconder and Councillor Rahman. So I didn't want to pull 2.5 and 2.6, but I do want the staff to give us a brief presentation on both. So I don't know if committee members would like one after the other, or just we'll do 2.5 and then maybe if you have some questions. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Chair, I do have questions on both for staff. So while I don't need them pulled because I'm happy to support them, but I do have some questions on both. So okay. I'd prefer that we get a presentation questions, just so that we don't have to have two lists of questions going and tracking.
Let's do that. Before I get to those items, let's just see if we have any questions or comments on 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, or 2.4. Councillor Primmel.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the staff. I do have a few questions regarding 2.3. And if I can start on page 8 of the original report, which is actually the same as the revised one. When we look at the number of inspections, when it says total, when I start with the building, 16,008 and 17,668 conducted. Is it higher because the multiple inspections needed to be done, or what is the reason for that?
Go to staff.
And through the chair, thank you very much, Councillor. So you're correct. It's say an inspection such as an insulation inspection was called in that day, but there was still a few items that say from the framing inspection that existed or was still there concurrently. So when the building inspector goes out, even though that inspection wasn't called in, he takes a look at that item and closes that process off in our system. So that's why sometimes there's more numbers than were called in.
Councillor.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And the following one, the plumbing, 7,500 received, 9,900. Sorry, I go back. Code compliance, 8,400 received, but only 8,100 conducted, so less. But we are stating that 8,482 were conducted within 48 hours. Can you explain that one for me? Thank you.
Go to staff.
And through the chair, the best explanation for that, Councillor, is that at times our permits get canceled or inspections get canceled, so that when the inspector comes in the morning, they believe that that will be an inspection on the day. However, until the inspector actually shows up on site, the contractor has the ability to go in and cancel that building inspection for the day too, meaning that it didn't need to be completed, but it was previously called in.
Councillor.
Thank you for that. By the way, congratulations on all three areas, 100% within the provincial guideline, 48 hours. So congratulations on that. Page 9, bottom. If we were to calculate the average rate of units completed, does that mean move in?
Go to staff.
And through the chair, yes, that would mean building inspections that are completed and occupancy permits have been issued if they need to, or those units are ready to be, or move-in ready.
Councillor.
Thank you for that. And last question, bottom 9, when we look at the cumulative units, 2030, and in regards of the Building Faster Fund, when we look at the provincial guidelines or our targets, is it, I know it's not the permits, I know that, but is it shovels in or move in completed? Thank you.
Let's go to staff.
And through the chair, so just to clarify, Councillor, are you speaking about the CMHC numbers?
Counselor. Can I get your microphone? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So maybe I'm gonna ask this question. Is this regarding only CMHC numbers or is it totals?
Go to staff.
And through the chair, so the CMHC numbers are not necessarily shovels in ground, but a foundation in the ground. So the shovel would be there and the foundations were there. So a lot of these numbers, a lot of them are building permits that have been issued and what work went through the building department that day. But the numbers regarding the CMHCs will be foundation starts or housing starts.
Counselor.
Thank you for that. And actually, I have one more. Additional residential units, the RRUs. When I look at the report, let's say on page 11, if we have additional RRUs, would they go to residential alterations and addition? Is that where would we add this number?
I'll go to staff.
And through the chair, yes, that is correct. They're added under the alterations section.
So thank you. So based on our decision or our new policy which we have introduced, it seems like it's working. But my question is, when you get a feedback from the residents applying for these applications, are there any issues, concerns, or anything that we can even improve?
Go to staff.
And through the chair, yes, we are working closely with industry and our relationship with our industry partners. We're asking them to flag any issues that they do have along the process, and we're immediately taking that information back. And as we go through our RPPI or our Residential Permit Process Improvement Group, we're actually trying to address all of those questions on a case-by-case basis to ensure that if we do have issues pop up, they don't pop up again.
Counselor.
Thank you very much for all the answers. No more questions.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee, just on those first 4 items before we get into staff presentations? Oh, Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Yes, I did have one question on 2.4, the development pipeline. So I appreciate the work that staff did with the community to develop this list. And we've received some communication regarding how this is a positive report and how staff and the community will be able to move these items forward. I am wondering, in the case that there are applications that don't move forward in a reasonable time, and there's reference to use it or lose it within the report, I'm wondering at what point do we consider taking different action if no progress is made?
I'll go staff.
Through the chair, this is, of course, is our first, our foray and actually taking a more active approach related to some of these parcels that could be moving forward with housing. So we're going to take a progressive approach. One is that just providing information, trying to be able to provide ability for folks to come in and try to move these projects along. The next stage would then be looking at ways that we could try to, through any kind of new powers that are provided by the province. There isn't a lot of specificity of what we can do under the new legislation. So as we learn more and then we'll be able to apply whatever new tools or frameworks the province allows us to. But that is definitely part of the progression of us trying to ensure that we've got more housing moving forward.
Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate that information, and I will stay tuned with keen interest as we can use all the tools that we have in our toolbox. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to comment briefly on this one as well. I will say I recognize fully this is a first attempt at one of a report of this nature. And I think in general it is a positive report. I will say that on some of these, I've heard some feedback from some developers that the numbers are not necessarily accurate in terms of properties that are still under their ownership, where lands have changed hands and they're still being reflected as not moving forward under one company's name when in fact that company doesn't own the land anymore. So I'm just wondering through you, Chair, if staff can comment on, again, recognizing that this is a first attempt, what sort of steps we'll be making to sort of address some of those concerns moving forward in terms of accuracy, and what challenges there may be in terms of you having those numbers available, because I know sometimes you're not necessarily made aware after zoning has been approved that properties have changed hands as well. So I recognize there's both opportunities and challenges here. What could we expect to see change in the next iteration of this?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair. So we very much do rely on the information that's provided in the first application that comes forward. What we tried to do is with this report is we actually provided some of that information so to be able to the development interests that were shown in the report to try to validate the information. So we will continue to do that. So if there is some corrections that people are hearing about that need to be made, we'd be happy to make those corrections. And we know that the development industry and the way that the development process works can be very complex as far as ownership. So we're happy to ensure whatever's in this table is accurate, and we can update as we go.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I just want to pick up and offer a couple of comments on what Councillor Frank was just speaking about with regard to the use it or lose it. I'm not sure that we're going to see tools that would be essentially giving us the opportunity for temporary zoning. Once we're granting zoning, I think it's very hard for us to start taking it away based on whether or not a shovel has gone in the ground. And it may actually disincentivize someone from acquiring a property where zoning is in place who has the ability to move forward when another partner has not been able to do so. I also recognize that some of these listed developments have partners in the not-for-profit sector. Residential affordable housing is in there. The Roman Catholic London Diocese is in there. Indwell is in there. And I think that there's more opportunity for use it or lose it around incentive programs, whether those are DC waivers, whether those are funding applications. But I also recognize that in some cases, the holdup is with our senior levels of government in getting things approved too for some of these organizations that are doing affordable builds. So I just want to share that I caution use it or lose it, although I love the catchiness of how simple it sounds is a lot more complicated, I think, than has been expressed. And I think we put ourselves in really, and I'm not going to drag us in camera and ask for legal opinions today. I think we put ourselves on very soft legal footing when we're approving zoning on a temporary basis. So I'm going to be very cautious and take a look at the tools that are brought out moving forward. You know, we heard very clearly from Mr. Wallace and LDI that another factor here is that when you get subdivisions, they roll out in phases. And so we approve the zoning. In fact, we just approved the zoning for 8,400 units in the Old Oak development on the psychiatric hospital lands, but we know full well that is going to be a 15-year to 20-year build-out. The fact that some of those buildings aren't going to be moving forward in 2 years is actually not a concern for me that building permits have not been pulled. So there is a pipeline issue here where the reasons are perfectly legitimate that projects have not moved forward yet. And I think we need to keep that in mind too. Some of these companies are doing very large projects with multiple phases involved. And if you're pulling building permits in a phase 1 of a subdivision, it doesn't mean that phase 4 is never going to be built. It simply means that phase 4 might be 6 years, 8 years down the road before you're building out that 4th phase. And so I think we have to keep that in mind when we absorb the information that's provided to us in this report as well, because there are factors beyond just when the zoning was approved that impact when building permits are pulled.
Thank you. Any other comments? And just if the committee will allow me a brief comment from the chair. I love this report, this pipeline report. While we don't have, I agree totally with the deputy mayor on the use it or lose it. You know, municipalities do not have any, I guess, jurisdiction or what you might call it about moving forward or forcing people to build once they have zoning. However, this does allow us to get a snapshot of where we are, because we have a target, 47,000 homes, of where we are on that target. And I think this would help identify maybe some potential areas that might be getting off the rails. Nonprofit was mentioned by the deputy mayor, that perhaps we can focus in on, see what the city can do to partner with the applicant and perhaps their partners as well, to see if we can get anything to move this thing forward once they're getting into 2 years, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, for sure. I know it, accuracy, et cetera, when you first come to us with a report is of concern. On that front, I want all of us, committee members and staff, to be looking at numbers that are presented to us that we're not using. You know, I don't want you to be wasting time doing report after report that no one's looking at. So I want us all to be, you know, vigilant. You know, when we see stuff come before us, go, you know what, I haven't looked at this. It's great that it's here, but it's, to me, it's not of value. I don't want time wasted producing numbers that aren't being used by anybody, including yourselves. This one, however, I think is very important. So thank you for the first kick at the can at this one. I see my comments have got some conversation going. Councillor Rahman first, and I'll go to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and through you. I just want to get a sense from staff, based on the comments here at committee, it doesn't sound like this is an actual tool to spur construction. And the challenge for me is that is how it has been sold in a way to the public as a tool for the province to use, or the province has given the municipality to use. And so, or the city, sorry. And so one of the challenges I'm struggling with is how do we have, and I think this conversation is helpful, but how do we have a conversation with the public that there are still very limited tools that we can use to move developments forward? And, you know, I was really appreciative of hearing from LDI this morning on their thoughts on this. And I appreciate the conversation here. I just think there is a false dialogue going on that we have more tools now under Bill 23 and 185, but ultimately this is not something that I see as giving us a lot of ability to spur construction. So I'm not sure if you can comment on that and whether or not you see perhaps further on down the road there is more opportunity for us to use this. But I think just based on the report, which by the way I really appreciate the report and the comments here, I don't think this actually gives us a tool in our toolbox that's going to be valuable for us and therefore help us hit our housing target.
I'll go with staff.
Through the chair, yeah, those are some really great and point-on comments. So one of the goals of this report was first to let's shine a light on this item, and then also we at every point when we communicate and have conversations about these types of things, we need to be able to know that this is like a shared approach moving forward. So it's not just the city, it's not just the development community, it's us working together. Part of our goal in bringing this forward was to be able to just highlight that any of these projects that may be off track, it's helpful for us, it's helpful for the developer that's involved, and maybe that will in itself try to motivate folks and also help bring about more housing more quickly. So the next phases would be to look at being able to is there any new tools, which we know there isn't right now, that we could be able to use. But I think is in our communications, whenever we're going and speaking about these types of things, that we have to just know that this is a shared relationship that we have, that we're trying to bring more housing together forward in the City of London, and then just highlight that as far as us, our ability to require or enforce or force people to move forward, that those aren't tools that we have. And we're going to do our best to make sure that people move along as quickly as possible, but we can't do it alone.
Councillor.
Thank you. I much appreciate that comment. And as I said, I think this is something where on the political side, we need to communicate that it's great that we're trying to find new tools, but this isn't one of them. That gives us some ability to actually move forward and move towards more housing. So I think that that's really important and key for us to share on the political side. Deputy
Mayor.
Thank you. So picking up on both yours and Councillor Rahman's comments, and I know I spoke a lot already, so I'm going to try and be brief. One of the things that LDI flagged, and I know there's a real world example here in London in Councillor Pribble's ward, and that's the Applewood development, where a developer went bankrupt, new ownership has come in, they're ready to build, and yet in a prior phase, we have not assumed the subdivision, and therefore the infrastructure is not allowed to be connected to because we have not assumed the sanitary and storm sewers. And so the developer who has acquired the property and is ready to go is blocked by another landowner not moving, well, frankly, they don't seem to be moving at all in terms of the assumption process. And so a two-part question for staff. Can we, in a future report, delineate those projects that are stalled because of infrastructure in a separate category? So whether that is, you know, we're waiting on a stormwater management pond, whether it's the assumption of subdivision lines, can the infrastructure delayed projects be identified separately? Because to Councillor Rahman's point, from an advocacy piece with the province, when I'm talking to MPPs, I need to be able to say, you need to give us tools to take over infrastructure so that we can allow other developers to move forward and build housing, because we've got a developer who's blocking that. So if that can be separated out from an advocacy piece, and are there, second part of that is, based on analysis so far, are there any tools, whether through the new legislation or even through strong mayor powers? And if you don't have the answer to this, because I'm throwing it out on the floor, completely understand, and maybe it's something you can follow up with me on later, but are there any tools that would allow us to force an assumption to move forward when the delay is actually blocking housing lands from being developed?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, so I'll start with the first element of the question. I think it actually would be very helpful to provide some categories for what might be the, some rationale for why some of these applications might be in a pause mode. So it could be anything from what was previously stated about infrastructure, or it could be that there's some third-party requirements for that approvals, like conservation authorities, things like that. So if there are ways that we can categorize these to be able to highlight what is the factor that's causing the problem, then I think that would be very helpful. Regarding the ability to enforce assumption of a piece of infrastructure. So we do have some tools to be able to do that. It is very specific to the subdivision and the relationship there, but as part of our subdivision agreements, we have the ability to call security and to take over some of those pieces of infrastructure. That's, of course, there's some risk associated with that, so we want to do that mindfully, but there are some tools that do exist in our subdivision agreements.
Deputy Mayor.
That's great. I will take that under advisement and follow up offline about some specific barriers, I think, where we need to investigate some of those options.
Any other comments? Again, briefly from the chair, this is exactly what I'd hoped to see. We see it already, stimulating discussion, questions, deep dives, perhaps on areas where some of these things would just kind of get lost in the big work that we're all doing here. And I think over the coming months and quarters, it might be a very handy tool to figure out where we can direct things, do things like, you know, Deputy Mayor spoke to, you know, bring highlight to the province that Councillor Rahman spoke to with actual numbers. Say, you know, here's where we're at. We're doing all this work rezoning, and yeah, we're not getting units built. Now, we do know the big elephant in the room is interest rates when I speak to developers, and now that they've settled and look like they're going in a downward direction, I think we're going to see more action. You know, we're going to be talking about building permits in a bit. And we're going to see a good spike in that we're already seeing. So hopefully we're going to see, you know, the pipeline of the zone where there's no action. Hopefully we get that effect happening as well. Okay, let's go to 2.5, which is the Dundas Streetscape Master Plan for the Argyle. I'll go to staff for just a brief presentation on this to supplement what we already have in our agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to introduce this item. For the purpose of that, I'll introduce Andrew Genome. Andrew is a transportation design engineer in our transportation planning and design area. He's been leading this project, so I'll pass it over to Andrew to introduce.
Thank you, through the chair. In 2021, the city completed a community improvement plan for the Argyle Core area, which identified the need to improve the pedestrian realm and prioritize active mobility. And the plan recommended the creation of a streetscape master plan, which was initiated last year. The streetscape master plan recommends comprehensive strategies to improve mobility, neighborhood safety, and reinforce the identity of the Argyle Core area. The streetscape master plan will guide future public improvements by defining design standards for boulevards, sidewalks, active transportation facilities, streetlights, bus stops, and trees and planters. This tool will be an implementation tool for future renewal projects and development in the area. Finally, the plan recommends some access management improvements, including modifications to driveways, which will serve as a guide through detailed design and consultation with business owners. The development of the Dundas Streetscape Master Plan was informed through extensive engagement with the community, including the Argyle BIA, the Argyle Community Association, business owners and operators, residents, and homeowners. And 3 public update meetings occurred during the project. As future capital work programs upgrade existing infrastructure and as new redevelopment occurs in the Argyle Core area, the recommendations identified in the Streetscape Master Plan will be implemented. Just to give you an idea of upcoming capital programs in the Argyle Core area, they include the Dundas Street East pavement rehabilitation between Burdick Place and Beatrice Street, which is aimed at improving the pavement condition. During this time, streetscape improvements and access management improvements will be included in this project. As well, there is a upcoming, in the near term, a bridge replacement on Dundas Street East over Parsberg Creek, which is funded through the Major Bridge Upgrades Program. And it's also funded through federal sources of funding. And it will aim at providing improved active transportation connections from LPH lands to Pottersburg Creek. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. All right, I'll look to committee members for comments or questions. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So some questions / comment, and certainly if staff want to respond to some of them, I'd welcome that. I will say that I have some concerns that are not necessarily reflected in the report in whole. I think maybe they're there in part. And I will say particularly the emphasis around in some of the language around the active transportation and the streetscape stuff. We want to be very cautious about duplication and redundancy. And so, for example, there is ultimately a connector from the Wayvale bike lane planned up Hale Street, but at the same time, we have a multi-use pathway already running through Kiwanis Park that in this streetscape plan now provides a connector on Dundas Street over to Hale Street. With all due respect, we don't need 2. We need one good one. We don't need 2. And when we talk about planting and planters, and it's definitely heard from the community, the desire to have more tree planting along the boulevards, which I completely agree with and think would be a great idea. There's a lot of concern that the in-boulevard median divisions, the breakups in the turning lane, becoming planters, and frankly, the lack of maintenance in the future that we may see there. I get a lot of concerns about the fact that, and I recognize that there are some provincial pieces here around where we're allowed to spray, and I recognize that there are some budget concerns around where, how many times we can cut along places like Veterans Memorial. But I get complaints every single year about the weeds in the lane dividers and along the shoulders of Veterans Memorial. perhaps a lesson on why we don't name expressways as veterans tributes, because they're very hard to maintain to begin with. The province has taken away some of our ability to spray, but from a visual perspective, it looks bad to the community, and people do not want to see that on the main BIA corridor in Argyle as well. And so there's been some concerns raised about the nature of what these lane breaks would look like and how they would be maintained. I know we're not approving any sort of specific projects today. And you know, in general, this is an overall plan, and bits and pieces will be looked at as different pieces move forward. You know, the Second Street work is underway right now. We've already had some paving between Highbury and First Street, where the bridge replacement will come in the near future. But I wanted to share those concerns in terms of some of what's in the report. While it reflects some positive feedback, I don't feel necessarily reflects some of the community concerns that were raised about some of these things as well.
Thank you. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, and I appreciate the Deputy Mayor's comments, and I know how plugged into this area that he is in his ward. So I'm just wondering if he can clarify on the direction that's provided here. Again, where it's a master plan approval as the plan identifies the infrastructure and the urban design. Are we currently being asked to approve the design in principle, or are we being asked to, at this point it says receive and approve. So I need a little bit of clarity, because what I heard you say was that this isn't exactly what the community was looking for when they were looking for this streetscape plan. And that, again, it really identifies some particularity around some of the cycling lanes, and that you said that you would take, or that one good one would be good, and that you already have one through Kiwanis Park. So I'm just wondering if that can be clarified a little bit in terms of the direction that's in the motion. And on Gainsborough, we'll take that extra bike lane if possible as well. But I do like the idea of a streetscape plan in general for our main streets. I think this is the direction that we need to go in. So I'm very pleased to see that the BIA was able to move this forward. I'd like to see our other BIAs be able to do the same, but looking for a little bit more direction on this motion right now.
Okay, I'll go to staff. The councillor, I believe, is asking for, you know, what are we approving here? Is it with specifics, with concerns that the deputy mayor raised? Like would he need to make an amendment to have those concerns addressed, or is this general approval that his comments could be worked in without specific direction?
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, we're certainly receptive to the comments. What is being presented here is concepts that will then be developed further through whether it's development applications, development opportunities, or capital projects. So a couple of different streams, and it's through those mechanisms, it's envisioned to be a long-term plan. So So more scrutiny and more design effort would go into the lead up to any of those implementation measures. And at that time, we can, you know, get the pulse on the neighborhood, pulse on our ability to operate the infrastructure, and where, with specifics to the active transportation network, where opportunities have arisen that we may not have envisioned, and rationalize the infrastructure at that time.
Councillor Rahman, is that satisfactory, that response?
Yeah, I think so at this point. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go to the deputy mayor just to, are you good with what you heard, you know, addressing your concerns?
Yes, so just to share a little bit further, I guess, in specific what's in the motion here. In Part B, it says that the master plan for the Argyle core area be approved as the plan identifying infrastructure and urban design guidance. And it's that guidance piece for me. We're not saying everything in this proposal is going to be there in the future. These are concept options for the future. I'm also going to take this opportunity to note that on slide 5 of the slide deck that was in our package, you'll note that the active transportation lanes there are marked as in boulevard, so they wouldn't be impacted by the recent provincial comments. So if they still make sense and something else in Argyle doesn't, Counselor, I'll take them, and if they don't make sense, then I'll happily trade them to you for Gainsborough and let you develop some active transportation in the west as well. But it's the guidance piece in the staff recommendation that makes me comfortable supporting this today.
I'll go to Councillor Pribble next.
Thank you, and through the chair to the staff. This morning at the Civic Works Committee, we talked about Master Mobility Plan and entering stage 2. And I just want to know, because again, as we all know, Master Mobility Plan is going to be tremendously crucial for our municipality. If we are going ahead and potentially approving sooner or later, sooner before Master Mobility Plan, for example, this area, is it going to potentially limit us? Because Master Mobility Plan is taking us so long, and again, I would say rightly so, because if we did it a year ago, we would never expect this kind of number of units, infills, etc. So I think it's actually good timing that we are still working on it. But is this potentially going to limit us when we see the whole picture and we decide this? How do we prevent it? That if we make this decision, that the Master Mobility Plan, which includes all the details, all the units, all the numbers, if we make a decision so we don't retract it and we said we should avoid it?
Go to staff.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for the comment. I think that's manageable, and that again, this what's presented today on the agenda is design concepts. If the mobility master plan identifies a future infrastructure improvement along the corridor, these concepts can be layered onto that. So I don't think there's a reason to hold back on this. It provides future guidance that can be incorporated into any sort of future modifications to the corridor.
Councillor?
Thank you. No worries.
Any other comments on this item before I move on to 2.6? Okay, 2.6, and this is regarding off-the-clock permit applications. So I'll go to staff for a brief overview to supplement what we have in our agenda.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. So what we have here is a report on reducing our off-the-clock permit applications. So off-the-clock permits occur when applications are incomplete or non-compliant, causes delays, and increases workload. This report highlights strategies to reduce off-the-clock permits, improve processing efficiencies, and to meet our housing commitments. So to explain what an off-the-clock permit is, I'll first explain what an on-the-clock permit is. So the on-the-clock permits are permits that come in with all required documents that we need to be submitted and take a look at to ensure that the drawings and the applications submitted meet all of the applicable laws and meet all of the standards. So this means that the building permit is kind of pulled in. We're legislated to specific timelines within the Ministry of Housing and Affairs guidelines. Those permits are reviewed within that timeline, and if there's no deficiencies on the drawings, the building permit is simply issued, and it's a very, smooth, streamlined approach. When it comes to the off-the-clock permits, this is where not all of the documentation has been submitted. This can also mean that not all applicable law has been met presently, so we could be getting into, they're not fully through the site plan approval process. Maybe there's a Section 28 permit, and they're still working through our conservation authorities to have it done. And unfortunately, these permits can sometimes just lead to some increased workloads, and they can lead to some inefficiencies. So some of the challenges that we presently have is we're noticing that we have permits that are sitting unresolved for over 2 years plus. These permits, by the time that we go back to kind of review them, it takes additional time to familiarize with yourself with the projects. And of course, it's just not good from a statistics standpoint to have these permits just sitting around. We want to make sure that the permits that are in our systems are ones that are going to ultimately be built. So other issues that we're having here is it increases, like I said previously, it increases the workload, it increases the number of times that we have to touch each one of these permits. So that is just not a good thing either. So what we're looking to do is just get these older permits kind of moved out, just so we have an ability to focus on the on-the-clock permits, the permits that we know are going to be built, and the ones that are, much closer to getting these aspects done. That doesn't mean that when we're looking at the building permits for some of our larger developers and some of our largest sites, as a few of the councillors have referenced here, there are permits that take multiple years to go through it, and there's buildings that are going to take multiple years to do it. We are working closely with our industry partners to ensure that building permits that are still going to be constructed aren't going to be the ones that are on the chopping block, because we will have confidence that those files are going to be moving forward. So some of our current policies that we're kind of looking at is we're going to go back to our building bylaw where we're looking at inactive building permits. And if it is an inactive building permit for over 6 months, we will look into canceling that. That doesn't mean that one day an applicant is going to open up their email to have, oh, my building permit got canceled last night. There will be back and forth with industry to make sure that these are stalled projects or projects that aren't going through. So we will work with them to make sure that those permits are, in fact, ones that need to be canceled, and/or we are now formalizing a standpoint or a process for getting these processes and these extensions kind of moving forward so that we have a tracking and history of why all of these permits were extended, how long they were extended to, and when a follow-up then needs to go back to talk with developers as well. Another process that we're kind of working with our partners in site plan on is when it comes to partial permits and issuing for foundations and site servicing permits, or even getting permits moving quicker than later. What we're doing is we're working with our site plan partners to ensure that we come up to specific guidelines as to when we can then classify a building permit as on the clock, even though maybe there might be a few of those elements that we talked about on the off the clock permits still to take place. But what we will be at that point is we'll be comfortable that the design is in place. It's not going to create, redesign work that's going to create efficiencies of having to re-review drawings that are just being revised only because of, how far ahead we are in the process. So we're really hoping that these combined efforts, as well as, the communication that we have with our industry partners, really helps to expedite things overall and create some new efficiencies in the building department to help keep our heads above water.
Thank you. Now I'll look to committee members now for comments, questions. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. So a number of good things in this report in terms of making some progress on this. And I know even from a couple of development applications in my own ward in the industrial category, partial permits were issued so that foundation work or even shell work could start while other things were being finalized, and that's appreciated. That's a step in the right direction for sure. When it comes to off the clock applications for me though, the thing that I see missing here, or if I just didn't read it properly in terms of there's a strategy to address it that I didn't take out of it when I was reading, I apologize for that, is the concern that I hear regularly that, and I'm trying to word this in a way that, because I don't want to sound like I'm being critical of our staff, but that we're not necessarily doing it right the first time. And so we get an application and we flag 3 deficiencies and we send it back to the applicant. And the applicant corrects those 3 deficiencies and sends it back to us, and then we send them a list of new deficiencies that should have actually been on the list the first time because nothing has changed on those areas, and yet only on second review are staff now flagging them as deficiencies. For the applicant, that's now twice that they've had to go back and revise their drawings with some significant expenses at some points. And in some cases, I know this is the result of an application changing hands. And one plans examiner has interpreted things in one way and another plans examiner has interpreted things in a different way. And when it comes to building code, I don't think that there's a whole lot of interpretation. I think there's a lot of very black and white rules. And so it continues to frustrate me when I hear that the application has gone right back to square one and now new things are being listed. And so I'm just looking through you, Chair, to our staff to provide some comment on what we're doing to reduce the number of times we are sending a file back to the applicant, because we're making sure that we do it right the first time and list all the deficiencies on the first return of the application to the applicant so that they can correct all of their deficiencies at once, come back, have it signed off, and move forward.
So I'll go to staff. I think I hear 2 concerns, and the Deputy Mayor can correct me if I'm wrong. One is, identifying issues that need to be resolved. They're resolved, and then new issues are highlighted. Why didn't you just bring those forward all together in one package? And the other one is when there is like a different staff member assigned to the file. And I don't know if that's true, if it's black and white, because I think there is some gray areas in interpretation, and different people have different opinions, I guess. But once an opinion is made, do we stick to it? going forward. So I think that's where the deputy mayor is going on those two issues. So I'll go to staff on that.
Through the chair, absolutely, that's again, a really great comment. I call that the moving the finishing line effect. So you start with somewhere, there's 3 comments, and then they come back, and then you keep adding, and that's not something that's fair to anyone. At the end of the day, that means that there was either something missed or something on either side, but either way, we need to be able to address those things to ensure that we're getting it right the first time. And we don't have multiple turnarounds, because that's one of the other pieces that's killing us too. It's not just that wanting to ensure that we've got a minimum number of time that it takes us to provide a second round of comments. We also can't have many, many rounds of comments, because that's something that is on both sides of the equation, is going to cause people a long time to be able to build some housing. So what we're doing to address that, and it's something that we have flagged, and one thing that's kind of making that even a more difficult or more likely situation right now is when we have some really great but very, very junior staff. So we need to be able to provide them with that starting point to be able to know how to comment, what is reasonable comment, and what is maybe a little bit more is not required comment. So what we're doing to be able to address that is developing like actual formalized processes and procedures for a number of our different activities. It's not something that we've had before, so we've actually, as part of the new funding that was approved by council as part of the multi-year budget process, we now have somebody that has been tasked with with developing those processes and procedures to ensure that we have consistency. It's valuable for a couple of reasons. One, it's giving consistency in how we'll be approaching these applications, but it's also allowing for that knowledge transfer that can be imparted with new people as well. So that's what we're doing internally to address that. That, of course, will also help with the off-the-clock permits, but it wasn't explicitly stated in the report.
And then could you also address when there's a staff member assigned to a file and that member changes, and previous decisions or opinions are changed with the different staff that's now assigned to it?
Through the chair, absolutely, that transfer of the application from one to the other, that will be part of this consideration as well. So we need a really great process for when you're transferring a permit or a review from one reviewer to another, because if that's not done well, then the new person may not have the background of what has been addressed or the other comments that have been provided in the past. We have to ensure that that person who's restarting that next review is starting from the point where they're fully informed of the status and everything to date. So ideally, you don't have to transfer a lot of these pieces over, but if you have a very complex project that, especially with all of the wonderful apartment buildings that we have, there's sometimes a requirement to do that, but we have to make sure that when we do it, that the communication goes along with that transfer of the application.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that it's a work in progress, and you really honed in on it, Chair. If reviewer Steve is working on the file and then wins the lottery and leaves, and reviewer Sean gets the file, I don't want to be, as reviewer Sean, revisiting the decisions you've already made. I want to be addressing the deficiencies that were flagged the first time and only those, and that's sort of the thing. And then I also want a cut of your lottery ticket for putting extra work on my plate. But those are the kind of situations where when a file changes hands, I'm really concerned that we sometimes have been starting back at square one rather than continuing from square 3 or square 4 in the process. And that sets us back, and it sets the applicant back as well, and then adds cost to every project. And that has an impact on the affordability piece as well, especially on the housing side, a little less on the industrial side, but I've seen it happen there as well. And I ask this because there was an example in my ward where an application was reviewed by at least 2 different staff and went through a cycle 5 times of having deficiencies, fixing the deficiencies, new list of deficiencies, fixing those, new list of deficiencies, fixing those. And you can imagine how frustrating that is for an applicant. So I appreciate hearing the staff are working on addressing that through the process as well, so that we minimize the number of times that happens.
Other comments or questions from committee? I'll just permit me a few comments. we fully recognize, you know, we've had new hires and there's junior staff, and it takes a while to get the experience, and experience is needed. Like, it's a lot, it's very complex, what you're dealing with, and we appreciate that. But I also think it's a great learning opportunity, as Mr. Mathers highlighted, because every time you go through that one thing, the junior staff gets that experience that will allow them to go faster the next time. The issues that the deputy mayor raised, which I totally agree with, I'm glad he raised them, we're also, I'm experiencing with Upper Thames. And so I'm looking to Councillor Cuddy, who I know is on the board at Upper Thames, and I ask you, Councillor, to raise those two specific issues, and you probably have, at Upper Thames. The case where issues have been resolved and a new person is assigned to the file, and they get either, we have to revisit those issues, or here's a new set of things that you haven't met. Because both the city and Upper Thames have to sign off on these things to get things going. So that's just a comment, Councillor, if you could bring maybe this discussion that we had at this committee to your next board meeting and kind of raise that. Yeah, if you'd like to respond, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you for raising that with Upper Thames. And you know, I'll reference my two colleagues, Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Frank, who are also members of the Upper Thames Conservation Authority Board with me, and they're also present today. And you know, this has been a problem, Chair, as we all recognize, and we've had this conversation with the Chair of Upper Thames and the Vice Chair, and currently, Chair, we know that this is a problem because you and I have experienced it as recently as a couple of weeks ago. So this is something that needs to be dealt with. It's something that Deputy Mayor Lewis is aware of, the Mayor is aware of, and the Chair of the Upper Thames Conservation Authority is aware of. So I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. We have to work closer together with Upper Thames and our planning department. And for the remainder of my term on Upper Thames, I will be working towards that goal. And I'm sure that my colleagues would agree with that.
Thank you, Councillor, and I apologize to Councillor Frank and Councillor Hopkins. It's the right-handedness of my head that I just kind of tend to look this way, and I should move everyone over to here so I can, by all means, if you could join Councillor Cuddy and just expressing what you heard today, whether you agree with it or not, like, but if you'd like to comment, please go ahead. No comment, terrific, okay. Yeah, so that's just, okay, Councillor Hopkins.
Since you are seeking a comment,
Yeah.
all I can say is that we have updated our reporting on, especially when it comes to Section 28 permits, and having more of a detailed report given to us at our board meeting. And I think it's fair to say that we really do want to work with the city to move these projects forward. So we are doing everything possible as well, and I think we need to communicate and engage with one another.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other comments or questions before we close the consent items? Okay, we've got a motion moved and seconded, so I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to the scheduled items 3.1. This is regarding 763 and 773 Dundas Street. I'll look for motion to open the public participation meeting. Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by Councilor Rottman. I'll call the vote. I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any questions of a technical nature for staff at this time from committee? Seeing none, I'll look to the applicant. The applicant would like to address us. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon, committee members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Taylor Whitney. I'm an intermediate planner with Selinka Preamo Limited, the planning consultant representing London Cross Cultural Learner Centre, or CCLC. I'm joined today by Vali Moroshko, the executive director of CCLC, who may say a few words through the public participation meeting process for this item. We're very excited today to be here in front of this committee with an application that has been years in the making. Our team would like to thank city staff for their hard work and their continued support of this application. We also appreciate their recommendation for approval to facilitate some much-needed affordable housing for both newcomers and other individuals who require affordable housing in the community. Our only request to this committee would be the consideration to have the requirement of the holding provision suggested by staff to be removed. The holding provision is to ensure that development cannot proceed until the ministry clearance letter for the archaeological study is received. And it is our request that this matter be deferred to the site plan approval process rather than a holding provision. We have no reason to suspect that there will be any issues with securing the required ministry clearance letter. The lands are made up of 2 parcels purchased at different times, and the clearance letter has already been received for the first parcel. Because this is an affordable housing project, the additional application fee does generally make a difference to the overall success of the project, and any additional application processing time could interfere with both the ability to secure the necessary CMHC funding as well as construction timing. Considering this, we respectfully request that this committee remove the holding provision requirement and rather choose to defer the requirement of the ministry clearance letter to the site plan approval process. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll look for other members of the public that would like to address the committee on this item. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. I see a gentleman up here. Please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Vali Morochka. I'm the Executive Director of the Cross Cultural Learner Center. I'm here with Quinton Lang, our board chair. The Cross Cultural Learner Center has been providing temporary housing for newcomers close to 40 years. This is a project that would allow our community organization to do more of what the community needs. Housing is tough. We are able to find permanent housing for the refugees and other vulnerable newcomers who come to our door, and this project would facilitate more affordable housing in the city. So the project prioritizes the affordability, is designed to be energy efficient. We emphasize accessibility by having 21% of the unit accessible, is transit-oriented, and the development is socially inclusive. The priority groups are recent immigrants, including refugees, young adults, seniors, women and children fleeing violence, people with disabilities, people dealing with trauma issues, racialized groups, and unhoused people. We are here to continue building a welcoming community where newcomers can succeed. We also want to, the councillors and the staff to emphasize the fact that it's also about providing safety and dignity for these vulnerable people, empowering the newcomer families and starting a new chapter, and strengthening the ability of all this village to become a strong economic contributor to the economy of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll look for anybody else that'd like to address us. No one online. I don't see anyone else at the mic. So I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Frank, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I've been advised that Deputy Mayor Lewis has a possible motion that he'd like to put on the floor. I'll go to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to move a slight alteration to the staff recommendation, which accomplishes what the applicant was asking for. It is an affordable housing build. It would move the archaeological compliance to the development agreement being prepared rather than as a holding provision. It saves them a little bit of funding. I did check with our staff. It still meets the intent of clearing the archaeological requirement because it's still the letter from the province clearing it that will be required. But as it is an affordable housing project, I think it just makes sense to save the applicant that little bit of time and money there. So that is motion 4 in eScribe on this item that I've provided to the clerk and run by our planning staff in advance. With
Okay,
apologies for not running it by everyone else in advance. It was a little bit of a last moment alteration.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Rahman seconds it. If you look at your eScribe, you should see the motion there. I see a thumbs up over there, now that I'm looking to my left. Any comments or questions on this? Seeing none, we have motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to 3.2, this is regarding 2118 Richmond Street. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank, and I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Questions of a technical nature for staff, committee? Don't see any, so I'll look for the applicant. If you would like to address the committee, please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you. My name is Nick Dujak. I'm with a company called Strict Baldwin Moniz. I'm the agent on the file on behalf of Encore at Upper Richmond, Inc. Just to provide some context, I like to say that this application is coming to you today as a way to upsize, or not upsize, but to right-size the building. The previous application to rezone these lands came some 10-odd years ago with the bonus zone. So since then, fresh eyes have been looking at the building and the site in general. Just to kind of expand on the right sizing, the building height has been looked at in terms of floor-to-floor height. So there is a request for an increased height to the building. That's floor-to-floor height, but also including a level on the top of the building for amenity space. There would also be a review of the internal layout of the floor plan of the building, which previously had some very large unit sizes, which just isn't right for the market today. So that would include the townhouses that were incorporated into the ground floor of the podium. So a number of changes have been made to the building itself, as well as the site plan to incorporate some of the engineering review that has been done. So in light of all that, we have reviewed the report from staff. We're in alignment. We agree with the recommendations. I feel like there is a good chance to have this building come forward now that there is a more appropriate building that is marketable and would be more of a good fit for the community today. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I'll look for anyone else from the public that would like to address the committee. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. Seeing none online. Sip. Please go to the mic, sir. Give us your name and you have 5 minutes. And I'll just make a list of your questions.
Okay.
And
my name's Tony Cottle, C-O-T-T-L-E. I'm from 2058 Richmond Street. which is the fourth house to the south of the subject site. Okay. Okay, there's a, which hasn't been mentioned, just, it's probably previously been mentioned, but in other meetings, but I haven't been able to make the last two. So there's the access off and onto Richmond Street had previously been approved as a temporary access only until the interior subdivision had been developed. Is the right in, right out going to be permanent? Would be one of my questions. And I can actually get my my questions to Jerry for follow-up answers. Okay, and now the at previous meetings, the setback from the Imperial oil line had not been determined. Has this distance been established? That's another question that I need an answer from. Now, previously, also the Uplands community residents had concerns about the building being stepped back, sightline into the backyards. And I see that the, well, I had a couple of questions here, is what would the distance be from Sunningdale and to the edge of the townhouses? And I do see that one of the recommendations is 21 meters. And to the apartment building is 29 meters. When I look at the Appendix D drawing, I see that I do not see that there's a difference between 8 meters, although this is probably just a rendering on Appendix D. So that's just a concern. I just can't see that it's 8 meters before it goes up with the high rise, which is roughly 26 feet. The building is going to have 11 stories. However, it appears that there's going to be a deck, and it was just mentioned that this deck, is it for public use? And if so, then it would have to be accessible to people with compromised abilities and have housing around the elevator. And technically, the building would then be 12 stories high. So is the upper deck for public use, and will it be accessible by an elevator? And my last point in question is previously a large group of citizens had concerns about the removal of young trees on the subject site. And actually, this was in the London Free Press covered this story. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find that quickly last night, the article. But the city council ensured our community that the mature trees would be replaced. So my question is, how many trees will be planted between the townhouses and Sunningdale? And how many trees would be planted on the subject site? So those are my questions and concerns, and I'm representing a few people in the community that couldn't be here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. We'll get to those answers for you once we're finished the public participation meeting. Speaking of that, is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? I don't. Is there anyone online, clerk? Okay. So I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Robin. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Okay, there was a couple of questions here. I'm sure Councillor Pribble had them down as well, but I'll just go through what I had on my list. And Councillor, if I miss any, please let me know. The access on the Richmond Street, will it be permanent?
Through the chair, that access will be permanent.
And then there was a question, has setback been established? I think the speaker referred to actually setbacks identified. So I take it has been established. I just want confirmation on that.
Through the chair, that setback has been established and is mandated by the Imperial Oil, and it is 20 meters. Any new development has to be set back 20 meters from the pipeline.
Thank you. There was a referral to Appendix D. Is the rendering there accurate?
I would defer to the applicant as to the accuracy of their rendering, but the setbacks that were addressed, the 21 meters and 29 meters, those are included in the zoning bylaw in the special provisions.
Okay, thank you. The top floor that was mentioned by the applicant, will that be accessible for the public? Or is the public allowed to use it?
Through the chair, to our understanding, that access and that amenity space would be private. That's our understanding. I would defer to the applicant if they have other intentions for that area.
Okay, I'll go to the applicant. If you'd like to comment whether the public will have access to that, or is it just for your tenants?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm, it would be privately accessed. And to the other point is the penthouse for the mechanical would also be incorporated into that 12th or 11th story. So there would be no 12th story.
Okay, thank you. And finally, trees. Do we have a number of trees that will be replanted after the project's completed?
Through the chair, the exact number of trees to be replaced on site has not been determined. That will be assessed during the detailed design phases of the site plan application. But we have included in direction to site plan approval that the 9 mature trees that are identified on the site be incorporated into the landscape plan for their site plan application.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of the questions that I believe I got from the public, but I apologize if I missed one. I'm sure committee members and visiting councilors will correct me. I'll go to committee now for a motion, conversation. Councilor Rahman.
Thank you. I'll look to move the staff recommendation. Would like to speak to it.
Seconder and Deputy Mayor Lewis, I'll go to open it up for conversation. Councilor Rahman.
Thank you. Before I begin my comments, I just had a couple questions I'm wondering if staff might be able to address on this application, just for further clarity. So the first is around the school that's designated here. On the application, it says that Masonville Public School is the school that is in close proximity. However, the school boundary is closed, and the school board is now in a holding provision sending all of these students to Evelyn Harrison Public Schools, which is about 25 minutes from this location by bus. So I just want to make sure that that's captured in the information for the purposes of the public being aware. It's really important as we continue to deal with school pressures in the area. As it relates to this particular corner of the city, as many people are aware, there is a expansion plan for Sunningdale Road that is absolutely necessary to address all the density that we are putting in this part of the city that is already there. And so this is at the corner where we were supposed to do an intersection improvement this past year, but we were held up on that, awaiting some approvals from Imperial Oil. But to my understanding, those approvals are now in hand in terms of the permits for the intersection improvement, and thus we're going to be able to move forward in 2025, which is why I'm okay putting this on the table today for the committee, because we are seeing some movement in that area and in that corridor. Otherwise, as I've mentioned, I won't be supporting applications if we're not going to be able to expand in that corridor. There's already too much pressure. The other thing is that this property will, and this was discussed just now, the entrance point is off of Richmond and not off of Sunningdale, so that does help in terms of traffic flow and management in the area. So those are my comments initially on this proposal. It's why I'm willing to move it forward. Yes, it does increase density, but I have to say considering what I've read in the application, I'm supportive. I also like to see the increased landscape plan or landscape open space that's included in this application, which is promising, and hoping to see some of those trees preserved and the 24 that's outlined in the report also on the property. So thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from committee or visiting councilors? Councilor Primmel.
Thank you, and through the chair to the staff, I do have one question, and as my fellow councilor Raman just mentioned, with the permit and moving, kind of working around with the pipeline, are we considering the setback already with the plans together with transportation that we are going to fulfill this requirement being certain 20 meters away from it? Are we already considering it with the improvement of the intersection?
Go to staff.
Through the chair, just to clarify, is the question if the proposed development is appropriately set back from the Imperial Oil Pipeline, or is the question relating to the intersection improvements and their setback from the pipeline?
Councilor, can you clarify, please?
I haven't seen the details yet in terms of how we are going to address it with the pipeline and the intersection in detail. But what we have been told is that we did receive the permit from Imperial Oil to go ahead with these improvements to the intersections. To this intersection, if that is the case, is this development within the guidelines, both city as well as Imperial Oil? So it's actually both of them, because I don't know currently what's going to happen in that spot with the pipeline. If it's staying this way, if we are working around it, or if this part is going to be moved, allocated 3-4 meters to the north. So that's why I just want to make sure that we are within the guidelines, so we don't approve something and then potentially we don't have a callback from Imperial Oil.
Yeah, I'll go to staff on that concern.
Through the chair, I can't speak to the permits for the intersection improvements. That's certainly something I can look into and follow up with the councilor. Based on the current location of the Imperial Oil Pipeline, the development is appropriately set back from that pipeline, and I can follow up in terms of the intersection improvements.
Councilor?
Okay, thank you for that. And I'll just make a comment that I did attend in August. We had the information meeting that the applicant organized. I attended it. I've spoken also with the developer and with our staff, and I do recommend this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, committee or visiting councilors? Okay, we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to 3.3, this is regarding 566, 568, 572, and 578 Colburn Street. I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councilor Rahman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis, and I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any technical questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant. If you'd like to address us, please, sir, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Caden McAllister. I'm a planner with Zelenka Priamo here on behalf of Victor Anastasiadis, the landowner of 566 to 578 Colburn Street. We're here for the zoning bylaw amendment seeking to rezone the subject lands to site-specific R5-7 zone. And this is to permit 2 new 3-story townhouse buildings that will be placed at the rear of the existing buildings of 572 and 578 Colburn Street. And then those 2 buildings, 572 and 578 Colburn Street, are currently existing lodging houses. Those are to be converted to 3-unit dwellings. and the existing duplexes on the site as well are to be retained, bringing the site to a total of 18 residential units, 12 of which will be new to the site. We'd like to thank staff for their report on this, and we agree with their recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for other members of the public who'd like to address us. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. No one online? I don't see anyone in the gallery going to the mic, so I'll look for motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll look for a motion from committee. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation.
I look for a seconder, please. Councillor Frank, second. We have a motion moved in second. I'll open the floor for discussion. Comments? Councillor Frank. Deputy Mayor, can you shut your mic? Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I had a comment and two questions. One, I just want to say this looks super cool as an infill project, so thank you. Two, my questions are, one was about how much surface area the parking is taking. Just based on the rendering, it looks like the entire backyard, but I'm just wondering if that is compliant with our parking requirements of like how much space is allowed to be paved on an area, and if that would cause any undue flooding issues for any of the adjacent properties. So that's my first question.
Okay, then I'll go to staff on those two questions.
Through the chair, on the first question regarding the parking, there's no actual provision within the zone bylaw that requires parking to be addressed, but they do meet the landscaped open space requirements and the building lot coverage requirements. So staff is satisfied that they will be able to provide enough landscaped open space, building, that kind of thing for that. And can you just repeat the second question, please?
Sure. Sure. I guess I did a two-parter on the first because I have another one. But the second part of the first question was just in regards to if there'd be any like undue flooding in the area if we are increasing how much is paved on that lot.
Go to staff.
Through the chair, there was no indication on any flooding or anything in that matter from our engineering department with this development. So through the site plan approval process, that would be addressed as well.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, appreciate that. And then my only other question, and I don't know if staff will have the answer or perhaps the applicant would know, but it does appear that there'll be some renovations in the interior of the existing buildings. And I'm just curious as to know what the plans are, if there are tenants that live in that building, if they'd be shuffled through, or if they would be receiving N13s, or if they are able to stay throughout the renovations.
I think I'll go to the applicant on that. What are the plans for current tenants where the renovations will occur?
Thank you. At the moment, we currently don't have any information on that.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope if you can convey to your the applicant that I'd be very interested in keeping people housed. So if there are existing tenants in those buildings, if they could be shuffled through or given some sort of other alternative accommodation, that would be greatly appreciated. But I know that's likely outside of the control of our staff and the consultants. But anyways, it's a cool project. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? We have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to 3.4. This is regarding 313 to 323 Horton Street East. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Robbins, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any questions of technical nature for staff? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant, if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, staff, and members of the public. My name is Aaliyah Richards. I'm a planner with Zelenka Priamo, and I'm here with my colleague, Matt Campbell, representing the client, Mike Tkachuk, for this application to rezone 313, 317, and 323 Horton Street East. I want to start by thanking staff for their efforts in processing this application and for their recommendation for approval for this rezoning application that will permit a mixed-use development on the subject site. I wanted to respectfully request that committee members endorse the staff recommendation for approval, and I'm here to answer any questions from the public or council that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for any other members of the public that would like to address the committee. I'll ask the clerk if there's anyone online. No one online. I see no one else going to the mic, so I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So I'll look for committee for a motion. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I'll move the staff recommendation.
Look for seconder, Councillor Rahman. I'll open it up for questions, comments from committee and visiting councillors. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I also like this piece of infill.
Well, very succinct. Nice. Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, and thank you for allowing me to attend your committee meeting today and speak as a guest. I want to thank the applicant for this proposal. This is an area that has been underutilized for years, since it was Nuther's Trophy Shops years ago. I think this is exactly what we need, Chair. This sort of intensification. It's a great project. I fully support it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to I'll have to recuse myself. I actually own property, but it's 100 meters from the site, but I fully support it, and I hope my colleagues do the same.
Sorry. Councillor, go ahead. Councillor Hopkins, I think you had first heard from you.
Yeah, I'm not on the committee, but I just wanted to raise a point of order. The councillor did say he was going to have to recuse himself, and he's speaking to it, so not sure of the process.
That's a very good point. Councillor Cuddy, you're not a member of the committee, so you didn't have to disclose pecuniary interest, but now that you mentioned that, I'm going to have to stop you from speaking there, and I'm sure you'll disclose that at council. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hopkins and others there for catching that one. Any other comments or questions? I'll just, if allowed, just a brief comment, not as brief as Councillor Frank, which is shows great leadership there. I concur with her. I'm really happy to see this come forward. It's an area that has commercial activity on it, and I'm glad to hear the commercial component of this project. And also, as Councillor Frank indicated, a great example of infill downtown. So very excited to see this move forward. So if there's no other questions or comments, we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to 3.5. This is regarding 1856 to 1910 Oxford Street West. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Rahman. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any questions of a technical nature from committee for staff? Seeing none, then I'll look for the applicant. If the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, sir, give us your name again, just for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Nick Dijak from SPM, representing the owner, Oxford West Gateway, Inc. Just want to briefly say thanks to the staff on this one. This one has taken a few years to get in front of you. So a lot of work has been done. This original application was submitted back in 2021. And obviously there was a few years of work beforehand, before that. So this one has been a complicated one. And from day one, we knew that it would be a challenge, but we are seeing this trend in filling our commercial sites and getting residential developments that are provide the biggest bang for the buck and these underdeveloped gray field type parking lots. So this is another application just like that, where we're providing an apartment building, 10 stories and 11 stories in height, along the southeast portion of this commercial site that's been built out for the most part. This would be the last phase of that development. In general, it's a good development in the Riverbend area, would provide additional apartment housing and higher density uses. As this area continues to grow and densify, it's going to provide that valuable foot traffic that does kind of warrant additional traffic and transit and shopping opportunities. So it keeps that little community node very vibrant. So on that note, I did want to address a couple of concerns that were raised by the neighbors. One would be obviously the a servicing issue, that a holding provision would be required to be put onto the site. We are aware of the servicing capacity issues in this area, and we are aware of several other sites that are or would be impacted by this capacity issue. And I just want to relay to yourselves that SBM, as well as other consultants and property owners, are working to find a resolution to this. So that is underway, and I'm sure that through the engineering process, we can find a way to resolve the issues. So that is for a future discussion. The other item I wanted to address was the setbacks. And from day one, along the south property limit, there is residential land uses proposed, designated, and zoned. So that interface was always a critical talking discussion through this application. So as a commercial development, we're always aware of these residential interfaces and try to be accommodating to the future residential use, whether that's nuisances, noise, parking, traffic issues alike. So if this were a typical commercial development, there would be those back of house uses that could be impacting those residential uses in the future. Waste, garbage pickup, trucks, that kind of thing, as well as HVAC systems and noise from mechanical appliances. So from my perspective, one of the improvements to this site would be creating a mixed-use building that kind of interfaces with the residential development, has different types of impacts imposed on the adjacent lands, but I think from an aesthetic purpose and from a land use functionality perspective, this seems to be a good development. From a setback perspective, we also addressed that item. Previously, we initially submitted the application. We didn't know what the future land uses or development would be to the south, and since then we have been notified and made aware of a proposed development going on those lands. So subsequently, when we were addressing the issue, the applicant was amenable to moving the building further from the original setback. So we are approximately 6 meters from the property line, which is not uncommon for mid-rise buildings. So I think we've achieved that interface and can provide a good development for this area. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for other members of the public that would like to address the committee. Is there anyone online, clerk? Okay, there's no one online. I don't see anyone else looking to speak to us, so I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Rahman. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll look for committee members. Councillor Frank.
Thank you, and appreciate the comments from the applicant consultant. I did circulate not very long ago, but before the meeting, an alternative motion. I'm not sure if I was seconder, so I won't speak to it, but it is regarding the setbacks and open space requirements. So I'm not sure if you want me to introduce a little bit to see if I have a seconder, or if folks had enough time to review it.
Let me see if we have a seconder right out of the gate, and if not, then I'll let you kind of describe your motion a bit. I think I did see your Counselor Rahman.
Thank you. I'll second to hear the reasons.
Okay. Fine. So we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll go to you,
Thank you.
Counselor.
So I maintained everything else that was proposed as per the staff recommendation, but specifically regarding the special provisions about reducing rear yard depth of 5 meters where 16.8 is required, and reducing landscape open space of 30%, which is required, to 20%. I'm suggesting that we stick to our zoning requirements and our London Plan principles in these two areas. In my opinion, we evaluate development applications on case-by-case method. And typically, in my perspective, how I look at these is if this was a tiny parcel and there is no available space for there to be appropriate setbacks, that, in my opinion, is when I'm okay with reducing them. There is a sea of pavement at this location, and it is owned entirely by the single applicant. Therefore, given in this case-by-case method, honoring the setbacks in order to be able to have the appropriate amount of natural vegetation, stormwater management, habitat, to be able to address some of the issues that come with having a hard urban pavement space. That is what open space is for. It is really important in order to be able to address those urban heat island effects and provide residents and visitors a more enjoyable experience. So specifically to me, in order for trees to be able to develop in between these two buildings, we need to have more space. And right now, my understanding is on one side it's about 5 meters and on the other side it's about 7 meters. And even within that, I'm sure there'll be other things other than trees between those two buildings. So in order to be able to have healthy vegetation growing between these two, and given the amount of space on this property that would allow the building to be set back more, I'm seeking support in order to keep the proper setbacks. So I've outlined and circulated that motion, and it does include the rationale as well in the motion.
Thank you. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. So I won't be supporting this, and if this is defeated, I'll be happy to move the staff recommendation. This is 223 units. Recommending the refusal for the setbacks has no consideration for the number of unit reductions that we would see from that. But it also, when staff are recommending something, it's one thing when staff recommend refusal and we say, you know what, we're going to approve it, maybe with some changes anyway. That's one piece. When staff recommend approval and we then say refuse it, that is going to the OLT, and then it is going to require outside legal counsel because we did not support staff's position, which is going to add to cost for everyone. Every time we do that, we add to the gap in affordability when we add cost to applications. And I honestly don't think when we're coming forward with an application that has a staff recommendation to move forward, that we are putting ourselves in a good position from an OLT defense to say we've decided arbitrarily that even though staff said it was okay, we're going to stick to our guns and hold everything to the London Plan principles. The reason that we make changes is because we're able to do that, but it's a variance from the London Plan that we typically make changes on. It is not generally to refuse something that staff is recommending is appropriate on a site. I recognize that a couple of the neighbors had some concerns. We've heard some of those have been addressed. But honestly, I've heard concerns from those same neighbors in reverse. When they've wanted more density, when they've wanted more height, they argue that the variance is fine and that we should accept their proposals. So I'm not going to get into, and I generally have, and so I'm not going to say no to one applicant when I have said yes to other applicants who are now today making the exact same arguments against an approval. So this is a non-starter for me. I'm going to support the work that our staff have done in recommending this.
Thank you. I'll look for other comments or questions. Councillor Hopkins.
Thanks for recognizing me. I do want to save most of my comments. So on the amendment, I would encourage the committee not to support the change. I do appreciate the councillor's concern around all that concrete and also the landscaping and the planting that's being considered. But I do think this has been a long time coming, and there is a recommendation that I'd like to speak to further. So I would encourage the committee not to support the amendment.
Look for other comments or questions. Councilor Rahman.
Yes, thank you. So I appreciate the discussion here, and I wanted to second this to allow a conversation. So I appreciate that we've been able to have that conversation, but I won't be supporting the revision.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll ask the deputy mayor to take the chair.
I will take the chair and ask Councillor Lehman to pause just a moment while I open my timer.
Thank you.
And go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo Councilor Rahman's view. This is worthy of a conversation. I just want to ask staff, what was your reasoning behind recommending this application, given the concerns about setbacks?
Well, let's go to staff for their response to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did our review of the London Plan policies and the Riverbend South secondary plan policies, and we felt that this intensification was appropriate through those policies to implement reduced side yards as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm not going to be supporting the motion. This is becoming a very unique area of the city with West 5 and Riverbend. In fact, I was down there the other night, the restaurant down there. It's a growing, viable node, I think, of the city that has this type of development going on. So I will support that, and no, that's the end of my comments there, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and I will return the chair to you with no one else on the speakers list at this time.
Thank you. I'll look for any other speakers to the motion that's on the floor. So we have a motion moved and seconded. I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion fails 2-3.
Thank you. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
And Chair, I voted incorrectly on that one, but the motion failed, so I'm not going to ask for a revote. I will just put the staff recommendation on the floor.
Okay. I'll look for a seconder for that motion. Councilor Rahman is seconded. I'll look for discussion or comments. Councilor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I am the ward councillor for this area. And I know this application has been a long time coming. It is, I do have a couple questions. My first comment, I guess, is I'm pleased that there's a holding provision here. I think it's important that the sanitary considerations in this area be taken into account. So that holding provision is there. I have a question around the recommendation. And as it relates to Part C, there is a trail that goes around the swim pond, which is just to the west of this development, just south of Oxford at Westdale. And if you look at that trail that goes around the swim pond, it sort of ends up where the commercial building is, and it's fenced in. I have had a resident reach out to see if what the plans for this trail are. I understand in the recommendation in C, it does speak to providing a connection to the swim pond block to the south, but it's not really specific to how this trail and where it goes to. There's no point having a trail that goes nowhere, be it fenced to the commercial, but through this application, will that trail be considered being completed around the swim pond? It is an area that many residents in the area use and walk the trails. So that's my first question.
Yeah, I'll go to staff on that.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. After some discussions with Parks Planning, we went through this proposed request for site plan, and they had noted that through this whole process, the applicant has proposed a connection from the Jot down to the south. So it's not right along the south lot line, it's actually along the west lot line, and it will connect and open up, like you were asking for, to the pathways to the stormwater management plan.
Counselor?
Good to hear that. Thank you very much for that information. I just want to make just a further comment supporting the recommendation, but I know this is going to go through a site plan process, and I really do appreciate the applicant doing that tearing down on the Riverbend Road side to sort of look into that residential development that's on that east. I would encourage the applicant through that site plan process to maybe even look at tiering to the south or how that's going to go forward. I'm not exactly sure, but would like to encourage the applicant there and supporting the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to 3.6. This is regarding 279 Sarnia Road. I'll look for a motion to open the BPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any questions of a technical nature for staff? Seeing none, I'll look to the applicant, see if the applicant would like to address us. Please, ma'am, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee members, public, city staff. My name is Daniele. I'm here with my colleague Harry Froses and the property owner Marco Palumbo, and we are pleased for be here this afternoon to present this ABA application for 279 Sarnia Road. Firstly, would like to congratulate city staff and thank them for their work, especially Isaac for preparing the staff report and reviewing the application. We have carefully reviewed the staff report, and we are thankful for the recommendation approval. We have also reviewed the additional special provisions and the holding provision, and we are happy with them. Just to highlight a few details, this proposal is to redevelop the lands, to have 2 blocks of 3-story back-to-back townhouses, and it's going to have 20 units in total with a density of 9 units per hectare. This is a great addition to the area that's much needed in housing. As outlined in the staff report, there are some public concerns in regards to the parking spaces, and I would like to remember that we are currently providing a parking rate as 0.5 parking spaces per unit, which meets the zoning requirements. And if you have any questions, I'll be here to answer you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for members of the public that would like to address us. Mr. Levin, good to see you.
Good to
you
see
have
you,
5
Mr.
minutes. Please go ahead.
Wanted to say on behalf of the Orchard Park Sherwood Forest Neighborhood Association Executive that we want to thank the staff from Zelenka Priamo as well as Mr. Palumbo for having a non-statutory community meeting to explain the proposal to us. Our executive has met and discussed it, and we feel it is the appropriate development in an appropriate place. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for other members of the public that would like to address the committee. Second clerk, if there's anyone online. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to close BPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. I'll look to move the staff recommendation.
I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Frank. Motion moved and seconded. Any discussion, questions for staff? Councillor Frank.
I like this infill too.
I'm going to start counting your words so we can get to a record. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, 3.7, this is regarding 1210 to 1240 Warncliffe Road South. I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Any questions of a technical nature for staff? Seeing none, I'll look for the applicant. The applicant would like to address the committee.
Can you hear me?
Are you online? Oh, yeah. Please, sir, give us your name and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee and staff. My name is Connor Wilkes, and I'm a planner with Dillon Consulting Limited. I'm representing the owners of 1210 and 1214 Warncliffe Road. We are currently seeking to rezone the site from the existing UR4 zone to a site-specific R5-7 zone to permit 108 stacked townhome units. We support staff's recommendation for the rezoning, and I'll be available for any questions.
Thank you. I don't see too many people left in chambers. If anyone would like to address this, ask clerk if there's anyone online. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Rahman, second by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll look to a committee for a motion. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Look for a seconder. Councillor Rahman seconds. We have a motion moved and seconded. Any discussion, comments? Then I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, that concludes the scheduled items. We have one item for direction. This is regarding the Hyde Park BIA boundary expansion request. This is an interesting topic. We haven't had a BIA expansion since, I believe, downtown put Richmond Row into their domain. There is a request from a delegation from Ms. Zapkowski and Mr. Delaney. So I'll look for a motion to approve that. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis, and we'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, Donna, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Planning and Environment Committee and staff, and thank you very much for your time and consideration of our request. My name is Donna Spakowski. I am the CEO and General Manager of the Hyde Park Business Improvement Association, and along with me is our Chair, Tom Delaney. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about a request for your support and approval for initiating a BIA boundary expansion process excuse me, in Northwest London. It's important to note that we are not asking for a boundary expansion to be approved at this time, but to approve that the Hyde Park BIA work closely with city staff to engage further with property owners and tenants, ensuring all voices are heard before a final vote in about 8 to 9 months. Excuse me, asthma all of a sudden kicking in. We believe this process will lead to a favorable outcome that supports not just the businesses, but the broader community. Without losing sight of the work we have done in creating what we believe is a strong and established BIA and a commercial area in Hyde Park, we look forward to continuing our work within the expanded boundaries as identified. Since inception of the BIA in Hyde Park, our vision has always been with an expansion of this nature in mind, and as such, we trademarked the words Uptown London a number of years ago. Our request to expand the Hyde Park BIA boundaries is rooted in a concept of interconnected commercial nodes that will form a cohesive collaborative network across this growing region. Hyde Park, Sherwood Forest, Oak Ridge, for example, would be recognized as distinct yet connected commercial nodes under the banner of the Uptown London Business Improvement Association. Our intention is to create a unified identity by fostering a sense of belonging for our businesses across Uptown London while defining and maintaining the unique character of each commercial node in the BIA. By expounding our boundaries, we can offer the same structured resources, advocacy, streetscape improvements, and promotional opportunities to businesses in these areas. Businesses that are facing similar challenges but don't have access to the collective strength a BIA can offer. We are keenly sensitive to the concern of maintaining the characteristics of identity that has been built in Hyde Park and believe that we have the insight and capacity to preserve that while creating a BIA experience that offers value for businesses across Uptown London. While the geographical boundaries are significantly larger than the existing BIA, now about 400 businesses and property owners, the actual number of new businesses in the expansion would be approximately 250 businesses in addition, a size that remains consistent with BIAs across the province. Last, to address Wonderland Road, it's a busy corridor where we believe there is opportunity to work with businesses in these commercial nodes in helping them capitalize on traffic that currently passes through. This is in addition to helping to facilitate connections between transit and the business community. We respectfully ask for your support in initiating this process so that together we can continue to help local businesses thrive in Northwest Uptown London. Thank you again for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. I'll go to the committee now. I believe Councillor Rahman had a motion prepared, so I will go to you, Councillor.
Thank you, and through you, and to help frame our discussion for today, I'd like to move the following recommendation: that Civic Administration be directed to take the necessary steps to expand the boundary of the Hyde Park BIA. It being noted that the Planning and Environment Committee received a communication dated October 8th from Donna Spakowski, General Manager and CEO, Hyde Park BIA.
I'll look for a seconder for that motion. Councillor Frank seconds, so I will open the floor for comments. I'll go to Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you. So I'll be speaking as a member of council, not in my role on the BIA, but I wanted to share some of the reasons why I'm supportive of the application. But first I wanted to just clarify some process questions, if it's okay, with Mr. McCully through you. And specifically, and I know that Ms. Spakowski also made reference to the next steps in the process, but I know that the BIA undertook some engagement steps already, and they've provided us with that feedback. But what are the next steps in this process should this motion go forward today?
I will go to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's important to note that this is a very initial step in the expansion process. What happens next is once we get approval from council to undertake exploration of this, is we will work with the BIA to establish and scope a boundary that will engage business owners interested in the expansion process. We will work to provide notice of that, of the process, the steps involved. And then we would provide, we can provide some information on the proposed levy and some levy scenarios as to what businesses can expect should we undertake the next step, which would be returning to committee with a draft bylaw and asking for that approval, approval for the second phase of the project. During the second phase of the project, that's when we would send out formal notice to all assessed commercial and industrial rated properties within that expansion area. And we would provide them with an opportunity to review the bylaw. We would host open houses with the BIA in order to provide further information. And then ultimately, we provide a 60-day notice for any businesses within that area to object to this bylaw. We would then return back to council a third time and ask for the bylaw to be approved or quashed, depending on the results from that polling scenario. So again, it's important to note that An expansion process is quite long. We have an internal process with about 36 steps. This is step 4 on the list. Thank you.
Counselor?
Thank you. That was very helpful. Step 4 of potentially 36 steps. How long do you see this process taking? And I also wanted to ask a question about the objection threshold, if you could comment on that.
I'll go to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair. So we are estimating approximately 8 months to 12 months for this process to unfold. The biggest thing that as staff we want to make sure is that all intended businesses and property owners and tenants within this expansion receive notice and are aware of the proposal that's going to be put in front of them. So we want to make sure that that engagement piece is thoughtfully developed and explained and questions are answered, and that the business community has an opportunity to engage with us and engage with the BIA on the next steps in this process. And then the second piece, when we actually come forward with a draft bylaw and send out notice, individuals that receive that notice, property owners and tenants, they will have a 60-day period to voice any objections. In order for the bylaw to be successful and the expansion to be successful, we require no more than 1/3 objecting to it. So in other words, if more than 1/3 of individuals inform us that they object to this bylaw, we would quash it and provide that recommendation, and it would not pass. It is important to note that individuals that do not respond to the bylaw, that is taken in the affirmative. Thank you.
Okay, our counselor.
Thank you, and I appreciate those answers. As I stated, this is the next step in the process to allow city staff and the BIA to engage further and to discuss the merits of an expansion with owners and tenants. And to me, this is a very needed conversation at this point, not only because engagement started in the summer, but mostly because what I've heard from the parts of the boundary expansion that are within my current ward was a desire to have representation of a BIA. And this came up a lot last year for tenants and businesses in the area that reached out to me about how they voiced some of their concerns and unifying that voice on some concerns. And so I do think that there is a desire. It's interesting too, because I sometimes receive calls or comments when I go out to visit a new business or a business in the area, and they think that they are part of the BIA already. And then I have to go over the current boundaries and say, unfortunately, actually, you're not right now, but they express an interest and a desire to be part of the BIA because they are in close proximity or have had a relationship for some time. And that kind of exists throughout. I like the idea of having a BIA that then has different nodes and different commercial nodes within it to allow for further discussion. And again, this being step 4, I do think that there's a willingness here to have these discussions from the staff side, from what I've heard, and then take that feedback back to the BIA, who will be part of the engagement as well. And then there's right sizing that can happen. There's other modifications should the feedback be not what that is exactly here in the map. So for that reason, I think this is a good opportunity for us to continue to move forward on an economic development initiative. Unfortunately, I think we do not have enough economic initiatives right now going on in this city, and this is one where we're engaging with the business community in a way through the BIA, through city staff, to talk about some of their, and reach out. And I think in any kind of engagement right now has the opportunity to provide us with some really valuable feedback, and for that reason, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Rahman, for sharing your thoughts. And Ms. Bukowski, you and I had a great conversation on the phone about this. So I'm going to take this opportunity to then express that I support a boundary expansion for the Hyde Park BIA. I'm going to share a few comments about some reservations I have about the proposed boundary expansion and ask a couple questions of staff about the next steps in the process, because I want to make sure I understand it fully. First of all, I will say, and I'm going to put my Argyle BIA head on here for just a moment. I like the idea of a BIA with different nodes. And in fact, this is the first in a while, but it won't be the last boundary expansion you have coming your way, because I know that the Argyle BIA is working on a proposal for an expansion as well. And we may be in a similar situation where we actually want to have a secondary node. And so I like the approach and the labeling of the node. I'm concerned, though, that this is perhaps biting off a lot more than we can chew in terms of the geographic area of coverage. And particularly when we start getting down Wonderland Road and into, you know, the Costco site and some of the other chain franchises in there. And one of the things that I appreciate about BIAs is the voice it gives to the owner-operator, the mom-and-pop businesses. And I get a little concerned when some of the larger franchises get involved and either A, don't participate, but complain a lot, or B, participate at such a rate that the mom and pops get sort of drowned out. And so I'm a bit concerned about the size, but I can see some logic in, you know, a further expansion down Fanshawe Park Road, a further expansion down Hyde Park Road. That makes a lot of sense to me. The Wonderland Road piece, I'm a little more iffy about, to be quite honest, and I'm not sure. But I also don't spend as much time in the ward as the ward councillors do, both of them who are on this committee. So maybe there's connections that I'm not as strongly aware of as they might be. So I'm open to having this discussion. What I want to make sure we're not doing today is that we're not saying these are the boundaries that we're going to approve an expansion on. And so I want to understand a little bit more through you, Chair, to our staff, through the engagement process. When you are coming back to us, would there be a phase where you're going to come back to us and say, okay, this is where we are at this point. We haven't yet gone to an objection vote, but based on our preliminary feedback, we're actually recommending council consider a smaller area. This is what the smaller area would look like before we go starting to look for support or objections. Is council okay with this? Or do we go right to you set the boundary and do the engagement and see the support and objections, and we only see it come back when we're looking for a vote?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, if that's something that that committee and ultimately council is looking for, this might be an opportunity to provide like a bit more of a comprehensive report back first, just to set some of our principles of why BIAs exist and provide some more details on maybe some best practices for BIAs that could help us in working through any future applications, but also through this the most recent request by Hyde Park.
Councilor or Deputy Mayor.
Okay, and that's helpful because I know there was another motion prepared in eScribe that said staff report back, and I liked that option, but I'm not opposed to supporting what's here in terms of going forward, working with the BIA and following through maybe up to step 22 or something and then coming back to us. Seems like you got a lot of steps to go still, so as long as there's sort of a touch base point with us again in the process, I'm amenable to the work being started and see where things go. I think it also creates an interesting opportunity for some discussions around what other BIAs may do and what right sizing there looks like. I'm going to apologize in advance because I have not said anything to Councillor McAllister about this, and I know it impacts one of his BIAs, but maybe this is also spurs a conversation about is two small BIAs like OEV and Hamilton Road more appropriately two nodes of a larger BIA, and so that they're not struggling with funding because they're now funded sufficiently through a levy. Like that kind of thing, I think, is potentially a discussion that's held here. I think even for the downtown BIA, the node concept actually offers an interesting approach to the Dundas Place sort of merchants and the Richmond Row merchants, where I know that the issues and the desires are not always aligned. And I know that causes some push and pull between the downtown BIA members too. So I think that there's lots of interesting opportunities to explore here. And so my only concern was making sure that there was a touch base or a couple of touch base points with us before we were getting a final map. So I don't need you to run through all 32 steps, the remaining of the 36, but just want to understand a little bit better what that looks like.
Councillor Primble.
Oh, sorry, can we have
I'm-
Mr. McCauley just respond?
I'm sorry, I thought that was a rhetorical question. Please go ahead and answer, Deputy Mayoress.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to clarify on the process, there will be 2 more touch points that we will have with committee. So again, after today's meeting, we will go back and we will work to scope that boundary depending on the interest level and the numbers, the polling numbers that we get back from engaging with the business community. The next touch point that we would come forward is with the draft bylaw. That's when we would have a prepared map with all the identified properties in what we would consider a finalized boundary. It is at that point we present the draft bylaw in principle to committee. Committee and council would pass that, and then that starts the clock where we send out formal notice to all those identified properties and tenants and begin the bylaw notice period, and then receive those objections. And then the third touch point with committee and council is when we return after that 60-day period with the noted objections. So there is an opportunity for council to weigh in on the final boundary when we return next, prior to formally going out to the community with the intended boundary.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. That's, knowing that you'll be back before us twice, that gets me to a comfort level where I can support this today. I guess my only other comment would be, I don't know if I love the branding Uptown BIA, maybe the Spakowski BIA, considering all the work that you have put into this over the years. I know it's been a labor of love and blood, sweat, and tears along the way. But I think a lot of us might still think kind of Masonville as more of the Uptown along Richmond. But that's your branding, so you do what you will with it. But I really appreciate the work that and the thought you've put into this, particularly around the nodes piece and how that might interact for other BIAs in the future, because I think this feels like a new approach to me. Certainly in London, it would be a new approach, and I think that there's some lessons that we can take from this as we move through this process that we can apply to other BIAs as well. So thank you.
Now, Councillor Primble.
Thank you, and through the chair, when it will come to the council, I will be supporting you based on what I heard today, and also thank you, Mr. Delaney and Ms. Spakowski, to return my calls. But I want to say a couple of things. The first one is, when we when the work is done with the area, it needs to be done with both property owners and operators, really both. And I want to clarify one thing. When I was told, when the staff mentioned that we'll be going out and talking to both, are we going to be presenting to them also in this time approximately how much the costs would be, so they know? And a couple of things why I think it's really important, owner operators, because as we all know, it's going to the property tax. Some owners, building owners, property owners, they will not increase the rents, leases, some will. And I think that both sides, they need to be, right from the beginning, they gotta know all the details. So I just want to clarify if they will be advised how much, because I'm quite sure some of them don't know if it's $5 or $50,000 a year. They have no idea.
I'll go to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair. So there's a couple things to consider when we talk about the levy rates that are assessed to the owners and operators. When we go out and engage with the community, what we can provide is the current 2024 levy rate as it was assessed. The way the BIA levy works is when the budgets are tabled and council approves, administration will then go back and, based on the approved budget, then determine the levy for the upcoming tax year. The second thing to consider is that when an expansion takes place, it is possible that the new budget that the BIA returns with might include a reduced levy because of the additional businesses that have been included in that area. So we can provide a couple options. Part of the process is some levy scenario exploration. So I believe what we will do is provide notice when we do engage the community of the historical levy rates assigned in that BIA area, and then also some potential or a range of levy rates for the businesses, so that they can take that into their consideration prior to us sending out the formal bylaw notice and going through that process.
Councillor.
Thank you. Just last comment. Be prepared for two things. How much is it going to cost me, and what am I getting? That's, I believe that 99.9% will be asking you. Thank you.
I'll go to Councilor Frank.
Thank you, and also appreciate the conversations I've had regarding this application. I'm generally supportive of it. The only question I have, and through the chair to Donna, we had chatted a little bit about it on the phone, but I just wanted to reconfirm the intentions that if in this area, if it was to move forward and get approved and the whole boundary expanded and collected all those areas, that it doesn't prohibit the future use or plans for social services or hubs within those areas, as we know there has been some tension regarding BIAs and having social services. So I just wanted to reconfirm the intention with that.
So I will go up to Ms. Zapakowski, which I apologize for not rolling off.
Spa with a cow going
Donna.
Spakowski.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Skylar. Councillor Frank, yes, we will continue to work with the city when we are asked to meet the needs of our growing and ever-changing city, especially when it comes to some of the issues that you've identified, for sure.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, because I think that every part of the city needs to be making sure that we're pulling in the same direction. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to take the chair.
I will take the chair and recognize Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. So I've sat on the High Park BIA board. This has been on the radar for a while now. I do have some concerns, and not both positive and perhaps the other way. The biggest concern I have is that the High Park BIA is a terrific BIA. Like, I think they do a great job. And I'm concerned that that has a potential to be harmed because of dilution, because of the sheer size of the geographical area. We're looking at adding, I think I counted up like maybe 5 different nodes. We've talked about nodes. I mean, there's Wonderland and Fanshawe. There's Sherwood Forest Mall. There's Oxford and Beaverbrook. And then you come farther down Wonderland to Oxford and Wonderland. And that's just the Wonderland portion. So across the top, down the south along Wonderland, then over into my ward, even though my ward does stretch to the west side of Wonderland there, extending down Hyde Park down to Oxford and Hyde Park. So a lot of different interests, I think, in different shopping areas, divergent, that will be, I think, a challenge, quite frankly, for the board of this expanded BIA, but not something that I'm saying that can't be met. Like, I think it can, but I just want to recognize the challenge that I see there. On the other hand, each of those areas on their whole aren't big enough for their own BIA. Perhaps maybe Oxford and Wonderland up to Beaverbrook theoretically is big enough, and it's a pretty big commercial hub. But all the other areas that I mentioned, I don't think that they would be big enough to support their own BIA, quite frankly. So this might be an opportunity for those merchants to have a voice in a BIA that they're currently not getting. And with concerns about the levy that Councillor Pribble raised, I share those concerns, as long as they know what they're getting. And they might say, hey, that's a great deal, for, $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever it is a year. I get a voice in the actions of the BIA and for what they're going to present to me in terms of enhanced commercial experience that will enhance my business. Yeah, that's a great deal. So I believe that has to be clearly pointed out. And I think it's an opportunity. I see here two parties are willing to work together. I don't see this. I see it's a collaborative effort that we want to get right here. So, in determining the levy impact, you mentioned that the levy, might be not as large because now there's a ton of new revenue coming in that could raise the actual levy for all individual members. I think that's a great point that could be worked with the board of the BIA to see where that lands. So those are just kind of my thoughts where we are here today. I'm glad to hear that there's a step process, because I want to hear back from staff, you know, early on, where they think we should go on this, or concerns that might be raised ourselves, and to the current BIA board as well, and where they're doing it. And I'm not opposed either, quite frankly, to, you know, Deputy Mayor Lewis raised this, is maybe, does it have to be the whole area, or does it maybe just consider going across the top on Fanshawe and down Hyde Park, you know, as an option? I don't know. I think those are just areas that to be explored. So those are just my thoughts that I want to present. I'll support the motion for sure to carry this exploration on, but I just want to get that out there at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I am going to return the chair to you. I have no one else on the speakers list at this time.
Okay, thank you. We've got a motion moved and seconded. I don't see any other speakers, so I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So we're on to 5.1 deferred matters list. I'll look for a motion to receive the list. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. Any comments or questions? Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. And this is in regards to the revised deferred matters list. I'm just wanted to make sure that by moving these to some of the items to other committees, it won't affect timelines or anything like that.
I'll go with staff.
Through the chair, I don't believe it would change the timelines, but certainly if there are delays or other information that needs to be done, they would be in connection with through council. But ultimately, I know that we've postponed, let's say, the green development standards, and we've been in touch with the council that raised that request, but due to other projects and implications that way.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just... Thank you. Maybe I'll just follow up with Parks and Forestry, because a lot of them are moving from this committee to another committee once we restructure after November 30th. So I just want to confirm that that's the case, and I'll do that before council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the deferred matters list? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome those of you that just joined us. You missed all the fun and the action. I'll just let you know that today, this committee approved zoning for 875 units. You might have read that London faces, as does Canada, faces a housing crisis of getting homes and units built to add to the supply to keep a lid on prices. So it was a good day. This has to go to council with our recommendations, and that'll be, is that 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks. So council will take the recommendations from this committee plus other standing committees and for final approval. So thank you for joining a portion of our day today.
Chair, we still have one more item on the additional business list.
No. I apologize. This was not my original notes. So we do have a request for a delegation from Urban Roots. So I'll look for a motion to approve that delegation. Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, delegation is ready to speak. Please, oh, there we are up there. Sorry. Thanks, Councillor. I see you up there. Please give us your name and your 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Anna Badillo. I'm the Executive Director of Urban Roots London. I just wanted to express my gratitude to be able to speak to the proposed motion that we'll be following that will greatly impact the future of Urban Roots London and the food security work that we're providing in our city. As a small organization that is rapidly growing to keep up with the increased demand for affordable produce, we never intended as an organization to be a long-term landlords. Purchasing the land was a means to secure our growing location in the city and to increase the growth of our capacity. Since we've started our project to grow affordable produce at a commercial scale since 2017, we've been able to distribute over 100,000 pounds of food, organically grown produce to our city. And I just want to specify that in 2017, that was 500 pounds of food, whereas now in 2024, we can produce over 22,000 pounds of food on just 1 acre of land. And 60,000 pounds of that 100,000 pounds was sold at an affordable rate. 25,000 has been distributed out through donations to other organizations providing frontline work for food security in our city. We've impacted over 7,000 individuals and 2,500 families since 2021. That's not including the statistics from this year. Just through our community pop-up markets alone. Over the years, Urban Roots London has become a stable local produce supplier for our city, and we wish to be able to continue that rewarding work for the years to come. In order for us to be able to do that, we need to severance the house and the land so that we can sell the house to pay off our loans we took out in order to purchase the property back in 2021. Without having this daunting looming debt over us, we'll be able to focus more of our efforts on growing affordable produce for our community to continue to increase food security for those who need access to it the most. And I just want to end on this notion that if this motion is supported, it gives a great example of collaboration across many actors and stakeholders. For a community urban farm to be established, it took social financiers, large and small donations, a nonprofit organization, neighbors, and the city to work together in ways to make it possible. Just want to leave it there, and I'm open for any questions that you may have. I also submitted a letter that gave background information of purchasing the land and where we're at right now.
Thank you. I'll go to committee now. Councilor Frank.
Thank you, and I appreciate the delegation from Urban Roots and all the hard work you guys do. I love your produce and your events. I just wanted to highlight, and I realize now that members of committee did not receive this, but there was a motion that was submitted on Tuesday, October 15th to this agenda, and just realized that it's not on here. But it was a motion from Councillor McAllister and myself regarding a bit more background on this. But I'm happy to speak to it and then perhaps have it added to the council agenda. I think that might be the most feasible thing. But there is a motion included in that, and which is also included in eScribe, which is great. But again, specifically supporting the works that Urban Roots does and supporting their request for funding from the Community Investment Reserve Fund in order to cover the cost of severing this land. I think we heard quite eloquently the rationale as to why it's required, but being able to support food security in the city and being able to support the work that Urban Roots does in the community, I think is incredibly important. And they don't often come to us for support or funding, and given we do have money in reserves and the amount they're seeking for is minimal and very difficult to fundraise for, I'm supportive of making a motion for Civic Administration to be directed to allocate that funding as per the motion eScribe. And I imagine that the Ward 1 councillor would like to speak to this probably more thoroughly than myself.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Lewis seconds. Councillor McAllister, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, and appreciate the committee recognizing me. I'm not often at PEC, but I appreciate being here today. And really, I'm just here to lend my support to Urban Roots. They do so much good work, not only in my ward, but across the city. I know this committee often focuses on the housing, but as part of that, food security is always top of mind for my residents, and I know a lot of Londoners also feel that as well. They've been just great partners in terms of what they do in the ward, largest urban ag farm we have.
They support a lot of the community organizations we have through their donations, and really getting produce out there as a healthy alternative for families is so very important. As Councillor Frank said, they don't often come to us. This is something that they do need to do to kind of right-size their operations. They do have a residential component, which they don't really require. So they're looking for our support, and I would kindly ask the committee support this. They do a lot of good, and I really think this is part of our initiative to support a lot of our strategic goals, to support an organization like this. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll speak to the merits and my seconding of this in a moment. The key question I have through you, though, to our staff is from a planning perspective, any concerns with the severance request? Now, I know severance is a delegated authority now at this point, but are we doing anything now that will present a problem to staff from a planning perspective in terms of severing the residential property from the ag use?
I'll go staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, the process that we were talking about in my conversations with Councillor McAllister were primarily on the cost to do those application processes. So it wouldn't have any, there may be an outcome that is favorable or not favorable, but having said that, it's to cover the fees for those applications.
Deputy Mayor.
And so in a very real way, we are transferring some of our Community Investment Reserve Fund to the Planning and Development Division to cover the fees for the processing.
Go staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, my understanding at the end of the day, as long as there's application fees that are paid, there is a bylaw, fees bylaw. So we as staff cannot waive fees. We can reduce fees. We can, at the end of the day, as long as there is some recognition of the notice that goes out, the staff time that goes into those applications. So that's where the application fees come in handy. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you. And that's kind of what I wanted to get to is really, in the grand scheme of things, we're not really giving Urban Roots 23,000 and some change to go off and pay a bunch of bills of their own. They're actually going to be paying the city bills to continue to do the work that they're doing. And because, and I recognize and I absolutely agree that we can't and we shouldn't look to change policies to start allowing fee waivers, but I'm happy to support this. I will say I'm going to take a slightly different approach than my two previous colleagues in that I know we have had Urban Roots come before us before through the community grants process, and they have been successful in that. But I think that is one of the examples of community grants that has been excellent and a successful investment and a good return on investment for the community. I don't think that all the community grants have been that way, but I think Urban Roots is actually an example of an excellent applicant who's taken the grant funding that they've received and put it to excellent use. So this is a very, very small amount from an investment, community investment reserve fund that has a fairly substantive balance at the moment. So I don't have any concerns. I have been to Urban Roots events. I have also heard those secondhand stories from some of the partnerships that they've had with the school boards in terms of education and opportunities for young people. And in addition to the food growth, I think that partnership in educating our young people brings a value that we don't or shouldn't underestimate. And those are opportunities that would not exist for Thames Valley School Board students if Urban Roots was not there. So I'm also aware that attempting to rezone the property in the past was problematic. We are dealing with floodplains, we are dealing with Upper Thames, and there would be Section 28s, and there's servicing challenges there, all of which are significantly more money than this amount of money would be. So I'm very pleased with this motion, happy to support the ward councillor and the mover on this and support Urban Roots and continuing to do the work that they do.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? the committee will permit me, just a quick comment from the chair. Thank you, Ms. Badillo and your team for coming today. I think this is a good example for other nonprofits to use. I'm very impressed with the fact that you've reached out to all aspects of the community. I see some good pro bono work being done. You've done good work before coming here. Like, so the tempting thing is just come here and ask for money. And as you know, it's challenging for taxpayers in London. So this type of effort, from my perspective, is very much appreciated, and for sure it leads me to supporting this motion. If there's no other comments or questions, we have motion moved in second, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Now, I believe that's the end of the agenda. I get the head nod from the clerk. Oh, and from Councillor Frank, so that's all powerful. So I'll look for motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Roman, hand vote, all in favor. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, folks, for coming today.